page is the one with the blue lines at the top. Extending the program through December 31st, 2026, concurrent with the biennial rate cycle. Maintain the funding at 300,000, retain the household benefit at 500, and thereby assist 600 households, which is far shy of the 4,300 that we're projecting will be affected this year. You could also increase the funding, well, retain the funding at 300,000, limit the benefit to 250, and reach 1,200 households. Another option would be 500,000 per year, limiting the benefit to 250 per calendar year, and assisting 2,000 households.
Was 183 the average?
That is the average, and really that math was just on the slide, taking the total, dividing it by the number that we existed.
So, could you quickly summarize the revenues again for this? You've got
There's nothing except utility.
You're-
At this point. There are
but you have
small
no more
amount of
federal.
revenue, small amount of donation,
Okay.
less than 10,000 per year. Yeah, and I will note that there's a note on one of the slides that 1% of utility revenue. So when we increase and we say our revenue slope is 3% or 4%, the difference between 3% and 4% is about $1.1 million. So when you're talking about subsidizing at $300,000, we're talking about a third of that. Yeah. So order of magnitude, and this may be something that you want to sit with for a minute. I didn't want to push you to make a decision immediately. If we've got a lot of other things to get through, I thought we could circle back at the end if you want, if you're ready to talk about it more.
You know, one thing Alicia and I talked about as well is, you know, there's the utility rate relief, which is applied monthly for people, you know, that are income challenged. Emergency relief was really meant for emergency situations, not something to rely on every year. And so another thing we could look at is maybe we limit it to no more than 2 years or one time every 3 years or something. It kind of feels like as the usage has gone up, just depending on it and using it every year versus it being for an emergency situation.
How do you define an emergency? Is
Yeah.
it a personal decision on the part of the applicant, or is it,
It is, and
Oh,
they're
okay.
going to
Okay.
the Salvation Army or St.
my
Vincent
wife
de
ran
Paul,
into a truck?
Right.
Before I came forward.
and I can't pay my bill this month, and I need my water on.
But it's not a program defined emergency. Okay.
Right, that's the intention. So when it was first developed, it was developed during the pandemic, right? When, you know, people were losing jobs and had a lot of different circumstances impacting them that were really out of their control. It was a way to provide, you know, relief during those situations. But as we look at the numbers and we see that more and more people using it, and we don't have the data, partially because we're not bringing the people to use it. It's going through the agencies that Lisa mentioned. It just feels like it's more than just an emergency use.
But you're seeing almost a doubling, and you still have the same standards, which is 60% property level, or 60 years old or older, etc. So that's.
Okay, no, so that program, sorry, I was agreeing with you and then I started thinking. The income limits are on the monthly program.
Okay.
That's where you get qualified for sustained reduction of your bill.
Okay.
These limits, you go to Salvation Army or St. Vincent de Paul, you say I'm in urgent need. I mean, during the pandemic, a lot of these folks were maybe living in a car, but then they would have had a water bill. So I'm trying to remember all the things.
But
They-
it's the same
yeah.
fund, same 300,000 or 500,000.
No.
Okay.
So one case, it's foregone revenue.
Okay.
So the discount on your bill is foregone revenue. We never even bill you for it. So therefore we don't have to collect it. We just reduce your bill before it even goes out the door. The other case, we billed you for the full amount of everything you owe and now you can't pay. You lost your job, something's happened and you need help.
Okay.
So they're usually going to St. Vincent de Paul or Salvation Army for food assistance. And then they sometimes receive other assistance while they're there.
Are they still helping you with or helping your customers with water bills? Salvation Army?
They're helping qualify the customers.
Right,
And we apply the credit.
they don't seem like they're helping us anymore.
Really?
Oh, well, we live in, or my district's pretty poor. I mean, call it what it is. And we had 131 shut-offs last week. That's just half of our district. In my mind, it's close to 5%
Oh,
of.
yeah.
Yeah, and we're counting just the church that's helping us, and they one time, or you know what I mean? So
Right.
It's good.
You
So,
know,
what if we reduce the payment to $200? We kept the allocation $500,000 per year. We get a few more households.
So currently it's at 300,000.
Right.
Yeah.
That would get closer to the 183 average. You cut off the 180.
Or we could go back to the 150, you know,
do you have statistics on the numbers of people? I know you've got the total customers, but dividing up those customers and where they fit in this system. In other words, how many are at, I don't know,
are you talking about income limit?
income
So
limit?
we don't keep income limits. That's part of why we have partner agencies doing that for us. Because we're not in that business.
And you don't keep track of the numbers of people those organizations give you?
We do. These are the people that qualified based on that criteria, either for emergency assistance, they qualified based on TFAP, which is the food guidelines, or for the ongoing program, they qualified based on their income, and Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency would have verified that. So in any event, a partner agency is qualifying you. They're either using income guidelines of one kind or another, whichever is most available to them. And the reason that Salvation Army and St. Vincent de Paul are using TFAP is because they're handing out food boxes. So they're already qualifying people based on that.
And is there a continuing check-in on that program? So if they're continuing to receive assistance from the third party, but if they do manage to get back on their feet, and they can make the full payment for the utility bill, is there any accountability for that, so that we're not continually discounting for somebody who's no longer on a system?
Yes, so in the first program where there's an annual discount or monthly discount, you're re-qualified on an annual basis by Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency. On the emergency program, you're either pre-qualified because you meet certain criteria, like you're already on different programs, or they're qualifying you on the spot by making a determination based on the information that you provide them. And that's why that's an emergency program, urgent need, short-term need. Yeah, with a cap.
And that's typically a one-time payment.
Typically, although I will tell you, when I was analyzing the spreadsheet and I was looking for one that was doing some stuff, and I found a person who'd been in several times for small amounts. But I was looking at a spreadsheet that went back to 2010.
Oh, wow. Do you feel that the increase in the need is maybe because more people are aware of?
Yes, I think we've made it easier to get it. I think Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency is helping offer whatever they can offer on their things that they get to people with. So whether it's electric company assistance or whatever, they're just laying it out.
I know in my neighborhood associations, this is brought up a lot, and in the sense of fees, and I review and I bring the little flyer that comes in, the mail about what's being able to apply for if you're low income, meet those low income standards. So I do feel that the word has been spread. More people are aware of it.
We are giving this context to you so that when we get to our rate setting, we've got some policy guidance so that we're creating the variables in the model to do what we want it to do, and we're evaluating the impact of those things. That's why I'm telling you the dollar volume and the impact in terms of rates. We've got 2 more presentations with a lot of information to share with you today about some really expensive things that we have on the capital side. And so I don't want to take too much time on this, and I want to temper that with, we have all kinds of other needs as well, right? We have needs in the community and we have needs in infrastructure, so. Are we okay if we pause on this and let Jason do the next?
When do we make it?
Well, I mean, it would be great if you already knew what you wanted to, when you wanted something else, and we could do it today. But we need some time to think about it in the context of everything else. It's sort of like chicken and egg, almost everything that we talk about in the rate model, right? Everything impacts everything. It's all put together to keep us kind of raising up everything.
I think it'd be important to know how we do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason I was talking, it'd be nice to know your thoughts on like 300,000 versus 500,000. We can run those numbers through the model and see how that impacts us. We know it's about, as Alicia pointed out, about at least saying 1.1 million. And so we're not talking a lot, but you know, our initial thoughts as we're going through the model is we're somewhere we're going to be recommending somewhere probably in the neighborhood of 3.5%, although we're not quite there yet. And so, you know, so then we would have to cut some capital or you know, to have this thing, or maybe bump that by another point 0.1 or 0.2%. And so there's a lot of different variables, and we don't need a decision that has to happen today, but it'd be good to know from the committee what you're kind of thinking, and that we can run it through. And when we get to that meeting, we'll at the end of August, I think we'll have a lot more information for you to say, okay, based on kind of what we've heard, we ran this through. One comes out this way, another comes out that way.
I think the capital expenditures are gonna be much more expensive, but more impactful to the city as a whole. Aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the capital transfer, you know, roughly 30 million a year, kind of on average. So a couple 100,000 here is not a lot when you're looking at.
Well, the kind of development that's taking place in South Salem and West Salem. There's gonna be a lot more hookups, I think. And what's that gonna do to the system?
Well, and revenue.
Yeah. We still have to
If
go
you're
with
looking
it.
for a signal, I'm inclined to move towards 500,000 rather than 3 million. Because the need clearly there,
Need is.
helpful to try to get at least 40.
And what was your recommended dollar per account?
I'm still edgy.
I was thinking 200 actually, the 500,000 and the 200 max.
Maybe we should get the Christmas wish list and then come back to it.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
This is just tinsel.
Trying to figure out how many.
I agree with that approach, though. I wouldn't be able to make a determination either way without having the rest of the picture.
Yes. Really, today is all about context,
Mhm.
and we have lots of context to share.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just add before we jump into Jason's presentation, this is like the first policy issue where we're getting you involved. The next couple of meetings is basically all policy issues, so there's more to come. So this is the tip of the iceberg.
Big iceberg.
Mhm.
Jason, was it?
Jason,
Are you ready?
Yeah, of course.
I can stand in front of the screen. It's like.
would you like to be here?
No, you're good. So we wanted to introduce you today to some of the work that we've been doing in the water system. You know, we don't take the delivery of water as, you know, for granted. We know we have a tremendous responsibility for the community. And as everyone knows, right, you're all prepping, right, for the big one. And so just to give you this is just to give you a sense of, you know, the things that we're doing to prepare for that, the deficiencies we see in our system, and how we plan to move forward. Go ahead. Yeah. Oh, there it is. Look at that.
So we undertook a comprehensive seismic resiliency analysis of our water system, right? So the 5 components of that, right, is establish your level of service. Like what do we expect to be able to do after the big, right? Like are we able to provide water in immediately, 1 day, 2 weeks, a month, those types of things. To do that, we have to look at the infrastructure that we need to supply these critical facilities that we've identified. We assessed the seismic hazards based on in-depth. What you can see with your eyes, we had structural engineers go out and look at our vertical facilities, which means our pump stations and reservoirs. We took a look at the geologic mapping for ground movement, liquefaction, landslide potential, and we used all of those tools to come up with what's going to be the impact to our water system and what is our backbone, right? So our backbone is like, our transmission line from the water treatment plant, those critical lines that go across the river to West Salem, some key community points where we could, kind of rally the community around if you need to come and get water. And then from that, we've identified some preliminary recommendations, some CIP projects, if you will, that can be done in the short term to start strengthening that backbone in those facilities. Go ahead. So we looked at this. So this is our level of service goals, right? It's color coded so you can see it. But we look at things like, are we, is this going to be available in 0 to 1 days, 1 to 3 days, 1 to 2 weeks, or long term? And so these are things like, can we get water into our intake facility at Guerin Island? Can we get it down the transmission lines? Can we get it to our reservoirs? Can we get it out to the customers? Right. So red's not good. And but the good thing about that is, I mean, that's 0 to 1 days, right? So we're set up in a great environment at our treatment plant that it's pretty seismically resilient, just because of the geology around it, right? So we think that within a couple of days after the big one, we could actually start moving water again. Should be able to have water. What's that?
If you have water.
If the dam, well, yeah, assuming the dam's still there, right?
We're
We're not gonna get into we're not gonna get into that today. So we look at, can we get it out of the system? I mean, can we get it out of the treatment plant? Can we get it through the system? And then how can we get it out to the community? And, the good part of this is that, like everything here is in the short term, 2 to 4 weeks. Like we feel confident that we can be back up and running in 2 to 4 weeks, not fully functional, but getting to those critical places that we need to. This is the next 2 slides of the water, what we call the water system backbone, right? So it's the transmission line coming into town and it's major lines that go through town, right? I mean, so you've got this one that goes across the river to West Salem, this one down Lancaster. And then we've identified some key points within the community, the hospital, some rallying points like state fairgrounds. All of these are areas where we think it would be critical to serve. We've got vulnerable populations, and this is Capitol Manor right here in West Salem. So we looked at that, like, where do you need to get the water first? And where can people rally around if you need to come fill up a water tank or water jug or whatever? The next one is just the next, this is the south part of CF, right? So Salem Airport, this is going to be a critical facility in an earthquake. This is a rallying point for the Oregon National Guard and all the emergency assistance that will be coming in. Corbin University is a highly stable area up there on the bluff, so we figure that's, that'll be a good place to try to get water to. Go ahead. We took all of our facilities, and there's a lot of them, and we ranked them as, what is the most critical, right? So highly critical, Guerin Island water treatment facility, right? Turner Control in Turner, where all the water passes through. And then we've got ASR wells, which would be, really heavily relied on our aquifer storage and recovery system. And we have an emergency well in West Salem, Hemlock Well, that can serve a pretty isolated part, but still serve a necessary need. And then we've got our reservoirs, Fairmont, Friends, and Mountain View. Those are our, if you know the system, those are our key reservoirs in in the city. Everything feeds through them, so we have to make sure that those are protected. And then we go down the list, right? I mean, critical, this one, local critical is a term that we use for a small, like a small pump station that serves if that pump station wasn't running, then that little neighborhood would be out of water, right? So that's what we call local critical. And we get all the way down to non-critical, and we do have some redundancy, right? So things like this, like College Reservoir, Maida Reservoirs, I mean, those that if they were offline, they're not going to really cause us too many problems.
Can you?
Yes, sir.
Somebody describes the number of households that are served by those various, not pump stations, but reservoirs.
So
Like when I see the one up on Croydon Mountain, it's not very big.
it's not, and those would be, so that would be your local critical,
Mhm.
right? So that's the designation that we'd use, that if that one is out of service, it's going to affect. It will directly affect the residents in that area, but it doesn't harm the greater population. So when we say highly critical, we're talking about Fairmont and Mountain View and West Salem, Fairmont, and right out of downtown. Those are terminal reservoirs for us. I mean, that's where everything goes and gets distributed.
But when you talk about those local pump stations or local reservoirs, like the one on Croydon Mountain, I'm sure there's one in several in West.
Yes.
You've got to get water to them.
Yes.
So that's part of the critical.
That's part of the criticality, and that's why, right? So those, like the one in Croydon Mountain you're referring to, right? It has to come through Fairmont. The ones up in West Salem, the higher ones, they have to go through Mountain View. So if we can establish, that, if we establish that beachhead, if you will, at those reservoirs, then we can work to repair everything going up to those other reservoirs. But having those in place and intact after an earthquake will allow us the opportunity to then kind of move up into our service levels and get services restored.
Well, it's not just an earthquake for service level need. It's also a lot of development taking place in various parts of the city that are going to need water.
Yes, they are, and we'll get into that in a couple meetings. But I will.
Excuse me,
I will assure you, though.
I'm just trying to get a feel for it.
I will assure you that as far as development needs go, we are very well situated. There's a couple of key projects that we're going to need in the next 5 years or so that's going to help serve those developments, but we're not anywhere near a point where we can't serve the growing community right now.
I had a quick question
Yes,
on the sheet that has the reservoirs and the capacity. I mean, is there just kind of a general number for number of households per million gallons or something?
So
I was just curious.
Okay, so you can do if you want to do the math, right? So the average household uses, so our number is 130 gallons per capita a day, right? So that's 130 gallons per person per day.
Okay.
Right, and I don't have my calculator with me, but so you take a 10 million gallon reservoir, see what that is. I will tell you that our standard that we work towards now for these new reservoirs that you were talking about is 2.2 million gallons, right? So we have this standard size, and again, I'm not going to try to do the math in my head.
Okay.
I'm not a whiz kid.
That's fine.
But,
that helps. I can do it later.
130 gallons per person per day
Sure.
is basically what we plan for.
Okay, thank you.
But good, Jason, the other thing that's important to remember about those reservoirs, they provide firefighting capacity as well. So
Sure.
Yeah, so about 50% of all of our reservoir capacity is reserved for fire flow. And that's the biggest need in the city. And we actually are, our standards for fire flow are above the FAA standards.
So when you say that, what you're saying is you work towards ensuring that there's that much for the fire, but also.
Yes, right. So we have, our reservoirs are here, right? And so we fluctuate like in this range, on a daily basis, right? We have the conservation storage that's a little more, but then the bulk almost 50% of it is built for fire flow, right?
Sitting there.
So for residential, right, so the fire flow requirement is like, we, you know, the standard is 1,500 hours. We shoot for 2,000 gallons per day.
Oh.
Or 2,000 gallons per minute for fire flow.
All right,
For residential, you know, industrial goes up to like 3,500. But we take that into account when we're sizing and placing these reservoirs throughout our system.
thank you.
This is just, you know, these are just some of the analysis that we use. I mean, this is peak ground velocity, so how much it shakes, right? You know, so we go everywhere from, I mean, you know, the green is good, but that's still, you know, 2.9 inches per second, you know? Going the wrong way. There we go. Right. Hills in South Salem, West Salem, very stable. The downtown core, Northeast Salem, it's gonna see a lot of ground shaking. And if you go to the next one, you'll see the liquefaction as well. So this is, you know, liquefaction, right? You shake soil enough, it becomes, you know, very unstable. Oh, I'm sorry, this is our transmission. So as old as this is, the good thing that we have going for us is it's very stable ground. That you know, this is farmland, you know, out, you know, through state. So, you know, this is, it's very stable, but doesn't mean that the pipe doesn't have problems. Go ahead, like liquefaction. This is our liquefaction, right? Again, Northeast Salem, areas along the Willamette downtown, you're gonna see a lot of problems. The good things are, you know, our Fairmont Reservoir is right around here. It's going to experience some problems. Our West Salem Reservoir is here. We think that's going to be pretty stable. I mean, our terminal, you know, our Mountain View and Fairmont. Next slide. And these are our pipes. So this is a likelihood of failure of our pipelines. Again, you know, the new parts of town, right, where we've adopted these new standards. South Salem, you know, it's a new area. It's pretty resilient, and also because of the geology, West Salem is pretty resilient. Downtown core, you know, where we have 100-plus-year-old pipes in the ground. Northeast Salem, where we have old concrete pipes. Those are the areas that are going to experience the most breaks. It's going to cause us the most problems when we have to go in and start repairing after an earthquake. So
Is that where they're leaking right now the most? I know you're losing water from your system.
we are, but it's not really, we don't have that much of a leakage problem in our core. I mean, these pipes are old and they need to be replaced. But, you know, our leakage rate really is mainly tied to our transmission system. You know, we do a really good job of finding and repairing leaks within our system. There's, you know, the transmission lines are very large, very long. And so that's a lot, that's a much bigger task. Go ahead. So from that analysis, and I didn't take you through all of it, luckily. But so we developed a basically a CIP list, right? What do we need to do in the short term, right? Short, 0 to 15 years. I mean, we say that, I mean, in the planning world, that is very short, you know? It's like, I can tell Brian about a project, and if it gets built before I retire, I mean, I feel like that's accomplishment, right? Medium, you know, 10 to 25 years, and then longer. What are we going to do for the long term? Go ahead. So we looked at those critical facilities, right? What's the likelihood of failure? What's the risk if they fail, right? Number one, Fairmont, and Alan will touch on this later. That's our biggest need right now, besides our transmission lines, is we have to shore up Fairmont Reservoir. It is a critical piece of infrastructure for the water system. Everything drives off of Fairmont. Mountain View Reservoir in West Salem, the other most critical one. High need. We've got to take care of those two. You know, the other ones, you know, I mean, you know, ASRs, pump stations, you know, Turner Control. I mean, those are the things that we really have to focus on in the very short term and make sure that we're prepared for what comes next. Go ahead. And then these are our transmission lines, right? So this is the system backbone like we saw earlier, right? Here's our transmission line. That's red. You know, we've got a lot of worry when we talk about our transmission system. You know, we're solely reliant on the North Santiam River, and we've got 2 aging pipelines that run across farmland that we're going to have to address. very soon. It's very critical. This is the, this is the backbone. You see this going across, this is the one that goes under the river. Center Street Bridge project, I think you probably are all aware of that. We're working with ODOT to put a new, they're hopefully going to make that Center Street Bridge seismically resilient, and we're hanging a bigger pipeline underneath it to try to address some of these needs. Go ahead. Low to moderate risk. I mean, these now we're talking about these local critical small service area reservoirs that we can eventually do some things for. And then this is, again, the backbone, so we're talking about, trying not to pay attention to the red and yellows. The greens are the things that, these are those medium-term priorities that we're going to hopefully address in the near future. Okay. And then that's the low risk. Low risk doesn't mean it's not going to fail. Low risk here means, they're not something we need to address because we're looking at our backbone. Right. So low risk. I mean, these are all, this is the core, the Northeast Salem that we've talked about. These are the ones that we know are going to fail, but we have a contingency plan. We know how to get water to these people, at least from a distribution point where they can rally to. But when we start talking about our repair and replacement program and our R&R program, you see a lot of these pipes, and we were working on these constantly. With the budget that we have, we're constantly replacing these pipes. We know we have a critical issue in the downtown core. We have pipelines that are 100 years old that we are aware of. But again, when you look at it from a risk standpoint, how do we get water to people after a big earthquake event? That's why it's low risk. They're going to fail, but it's low risk to the to the community at large. Right. All right, so don't get too excited about this.
Yeah.
This is a really low number. This is only $15 million, only $15 million. But this is based on this known issues. So we had structural engineers go out to our facilities with their eyeballs only. We're not taking core samples. We're not checking rebar. They're just looking at things like, roof joists. Are things secured to the ground? Are things going to topple over when they start shaking? So this $15 million is not to be misconstrued. I mean, this is like the things that we can easily go out and fix today. We haven't done any additional studies, right? So you start going out to some of these reservoirs and doing in-depth structural analysis, you're going to find a lot more problems, right? But what we know, what we can see with our eyes today, 15 million, go to the next one, 16.9 million. Again, if we had the money to just go out and just start, bolting things to the ground, shoring up some of the things that we know about, that's the number. But again, that doesn't even, we've got some really big needs, Fairmont Reservoir, it's going to, it could cost that just to fix, Fairmont. And then, okay. So I always like to leave everybody gasping. Okay. So the next one, this is where we get good. $2.8 billion. There we go, to replace our pipelines. And that's, so, right. We're not gonna get there. I don't know what kind of rate slope you guys are gonna set, but I still don't think we're gonna get there. But, if we're looking at hardening up all of our pipelines and making them seismically resilient, there's your number. That's the takeaway. That's all I have for you, unless you have any questions.
And I would just share, I think the good news on that smaller number, there are things that we can go out there and do for lower money that is going to help stabilize, our system.
And that's I think that's the key point. It's we've identified some really critical deficiencies in our system. And, I know $15 million is a lot, but when you spread that out over 20 plus facilities, and things that we can do right away. And so we're taking this list, we're plugging it into our ongoing CIP. Some of these are so small, they're operational projects, right? I mean, it's somebody going out, and strapping some things against the wall or bolting down a transformer, things like that. There's some other ones that are a little more in depth, reinforcing roof trusses and making sure that those facilities are still standing at the end.
To what extent are those kind of eyeball estimates? What confidence do you have that they would actually provide a significant benefit
Right, so,
without the analysis?
so if we dove deeper into this, you would see we've ranked them on how fast, are these, the level of occupancy, right?
Okay.
They can actually, so a lot of what we're trying to do for some of those critical facilities is making sure that we can get into the building,
Okay,
and so that's the type of estimates we're looking at. It's
Okay.
not, is the pump falling over? It's like, can you get in there and actually start working on repairing?
okay.
Yeah, so again, that number is a little misleading because it's, it's not, it doesn't capture the essence of trying to get everything ready. But it's, things that we can do right now to make sure that we can get in and start making the repair.
You haven't said anywhere in here anything about the wells. Or is the city not using the wells anymore?
We use the ASR wells. And
I
as
think
part,
you used them when you got that bad water. didn't
yes, we did.
you?
And as part of the analysis we looked at, I mean, go back to the liquefaction. Yeah, so we did look at that. So these are, we've got these wells. So we looked at areas where you could possibly put emergency wells, right? And where it would be most stable and where it could supply water to that backbone.
I know Kaiser has wells too.
Yes, they do. Yeah, and we have an intertie with Kaiser. But we're looking at, where could the city develop some emergency supplies? And our idea is not, pull these into our water system. Our idea is like, can we put them in a school park, right? Use it for irrigation, but in the event of an earthquake and a distribution disruption, then that's a place you could rally to fill your water jugs up. So that is definitely something that we looked at and we have in our plans.
I don't want to cut you short, but.
I know,
think we
Alan's
have-
got to go.
Yeah. Alan's got one more for future capital needs. With that bright bit of billion.
I don't know if he can top my $2.8 billion. He's gonna get really close.
It's
It's
close
about
for
cleanup,
2.9.
That's just,
He's gonna get really.
2.864 is what I said.
seismic is just one issue that's facing our utilities, right? So, thanks all for having me here today. Two objectives. One is just to kind of give you a quick overview of what's in the 5-year capital improvement plan for our utilities. And then talk a little bit about what's not included in that plan as far as future needs and things that we're looking out for, in addition to the wonderful news that Jason just brought. So, starting with the current capital improvement plan that was just approved last month. I've provided here is this kind of a summary of what's in it as far as utilities go. And I think most folks know every year we put together a 5-year programming summary of how we intend to budget funds for all city capital projects. And the utilities make up about 40% of that total number. So there's 64 utility projects in the document amounting to just short of $200 million. The funding sources are primarily utility rates, but we do get some system development charges to deal with some of those growth related expenses that we were talking about earlier. And we apply for grants where we can. One good example of that is the Bennett Dam complex. So that is the diversion that provides water to our treatment plant. And it needs work. And so we've applied to NOAA for a grant there to help work on those dams and improve fisheries at the same time. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. The projects are all scored with independent criteria. And it's things like asset criticality, how critical it is. Are there regulatory requirements that we need to meet? Does it combine with other projects that are happening so we get economies of scale? And then this last year, we also added equity into that calculation, not just for utility projects, but for all city projects. So what I wanted to do is for each utility, just kind of highlight a few things in terms of either important projects or just give you a flavor of the types of projects that are in the CIP. So starting with stormwater, We have several culvert replacement projects in the program. We have a project in South Salem off of Mountain View Drive where we're trying to solve a flooding issue in that neighborhood. We actually purchased a property where we can create some flood storage there. It was a home that was continually being damaged with floods, and so it sort of made sense just to buy the home and create the long-term solution. So that construction is starting this summer. And then another example of the types of projects that are in all utilities. So with the $300 million safety and livability bond that passed back in 22, we have a number of street projects where we're doing pavement work. And we took a look at all the utilities under those leads to make sure to prioritize repairs that might be needed there, so we don't pave and then, within a couple of years have to come back and plant that brand new beautiful pavement. So Center Street is scheduled for pavement work in 2028. So we've got accompanying stormwater improvements to go with that. And there's a number of those types of projects throughout the program in all three utilities. Go ahead. Wastewater, there's kind of two pieces to the puzzle, right? Our Willow Lake Treatment Facility has a lot of aging infrastructure. We've been doing a lot of work out there. So there's lots more to do. And so we've got a number of improvements continuing through the 5-year program at Willow Lake, including work on the clarifiers and digesters, both part of the treatment process out there. Orland Road is another utility avoidance for the bond program. The city has a construction and demolition landfill at the airport we're not using it anymore. That's why we like empty Vector trucks and things like that in the old days, and we need to close that per the EQ requirements. So that's a responsibility that the utility has to take care of that. And then one other issue that you hear talked about with our sewer system or wastewater system especially is overflows during heavy rain events, right? So I think most folks know when we get high rainfall events here in town, because of the age of our pipes, just like our water system, they're leaky. And so with those big rain events, we see huge surges in the system of wastewater heading towards the treatment plant. But sometimes it's so much that we have overflow. So that's what SSO means on that last project, is sanitary sewer overflow. So we have projects identified to find those areas where there's constrictions or big inflow sources and try to reduce those to prevent those from happening. So one example is the Manzanita Way project. It's actually in Kaiser, because we operate and maintain and do capital work on that system under our intergovernmental agreement with Kaiser.
But without pumping station, you have needs for replacing pumping stations.
Right now, for water pump stations, we've done a lot of work there, so there's not a huge demand there. There's new pumping stations being built as part of development, is mostly what we're seeing. On the water side, I mentioned the Bennett Dam complex. So the picture here actually shows what a replacement of Upper Bennett Dam could look like. What we would like to do there is replace that structure with one that gives us more control over the water surface. So I don't know how many folks know, but over time we've had gravel building up behind the existing dam that is sort of changing the hydraulics in the river and changing where the river flow wants to go. And it threatens the intake that we have for our plant, that it could move around and we can't pull as much water from the river as we need to. And part of the reason for that is we have no control over the water surface. That dam is fixed. The only thing we can do is in the summertime, we go out and put flashboards in it that raise it a few inches. And so what this type of structure would do is actually allow us to lower it completely to the riverbed in the wintertime so that all that gravel can pass through. And then in the summertime, when we need to hold back more water because flows are lower, we can raise it and actually control its elevation, because different parts of it can be raised or lowered. And that gives us much more control and much more resiliency as far as getting water to our plant. So we've done a lot of work on the treatment side at our plant to deal with the cyanotoxin issue. And now it's time to protect that investment to make sure that we get the water to that brand new equipment. So the water program, I mentioned that grant. It's a $25 million grant that we applied for from NOAA, and then we have $10 million in city funds and utility funds to go with that would fund this project. We expect to hear from NOAA on that. Actually, we're supposed to be by now. Their selection process is taking longer, so we should know whether we're successful in that or not. If we are, it's great news, because that's $25 million that utility doesn't have to put up. If it's not, that need is still there and we're gonna have to figure out what to do about it. We talked about the Center Street Bridge project. So that's a big resiliency piece. The State Street water line is another bond project. And that is actually, State Street had one of our oldest pipes in town. It's over 100 years old. So we'll replace that line. That's a good example of where we have needs for old pipe. And we talked about Fairmont Reservoir. Just for scale, you saw Jason's numbers, the actual project number that's in the program for Fairmont Reservoir is more like $7 million. So once we get in there and really do everything that needs to be done, those numbers go up quite a bit. Just how the money's allocated. We talked about this a little bit already, but this is how it's programmed out through the 5 years in each utility. It's about, anywhere between $30 and $40 million, just depending on how the project's cash flow ebbs and flows. The utility rate piece of that is right around the $30 million number that Brian mentioned. That's what we try to preserve, from the rates to have that sort of constant number. And the rest is made up from SDCs or whatever grants we find. And that's a back and forth process between the engineering division and Alicia's admin group, as we kind of talk about, here's what the project needs look like, here's what we think the capital rate transfer can look like with all the other utility expenses, and we try to balance that out, and that's what shows up here. So the number won't always be exactly 30. So that's kind of a quick overview of what's in the CIP. But what's not in there is there's lots more. And I'm sure one of the questions in your mind would be, well, how much does all this stuff cost? And the answer is it depends, because you got to look into it more. But we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in needs here, just in this next bullet. So we talked about Franzen Reservoir. That's our main storage before water comes to town. So between Staten and Turner, where Franzen is, that's our main storage before it gets distributed to town. It has a floating cover that's over 20 years old and nearing the end of its useful life. So we know there's a replacement coming there. We think that's probably about $25 million minimum. We talked about the transmission mains. Those pipes were built in the 30s and the 50s, and there's multiple miles of them. So we know that's an issue that needs to get worked on, especially for seismic resiliency. And then all the other things Jason talked about. Fairmont Reservoir is the only one of those things on that list that's currently in the CIP, right? We also talked about rehabilitation and replacement, so pipeline work, both water and wastewater and stormwater, all three. And right now in the program, we have anywhere from $500,000 to $1.5 million per year for each one of those utilities to go out and do pipe repairs or replacements where it's needed. We could easily be doing 10 or 20 times that amount if we have the money and the resources to deliver it. So that's where the needs are. Some of the work we're doing with our asset management, CityWorks implementation will help us really refine the reporting on the conditions of our pipe and what's needed, but we know it's many millions more than what we're funding right now. On the wastewater side, all of West Salem depends on a pump station that collects everything that it comes from West Salem and then pumps it under the Willamette to Willow Lake. That infrastructure is aging and needs work as well. And then thinking about Willow Lake some more, we know there's requirements coming both for temperature, total maximum daily load in the Willamette, and an update of their permit to discharge to the Willamette. So there's going to be additional ratcheting down of what we're allowed to discharge. That's going to likely result in costs for us at the treatment plant that we don't have a number for right now, but we know what we need. Those are the main things I wanted to share. There's probably more, but these are some of the big ticket items that we're tracking that we know we'll have to define and start working into the CIP in the near future. Yeah.
What do you anticipate the time frame on the TMDL limits?
I think it's probably in the next few years. It's kind of pushed out.
Yeah, I know they've been kind of dragging.
Yes. No, they have just an update on that. I just want to call on that this morning. The Rural Advisory Committee for the meeting this month, and we expect the TMDL to be released probably in 7 minutes.
Okay. Is that still for comment though, or is it?
That'll be for comment, but it'll be their final version. And so we are monitoring that very closely because as proposed right now, it's causing us.
Around the first year, sounds like.
Yeah, it's causing us, it's causing us some heartache right now.
And that's got
It'll only get worse.
implications for the stormwater utilities.
Yes, I have a question. So the wastewater in West Salem gets pumped over to Willow Lake to then get treated and then back into the Willamette River.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if there would be cost efficiency to build a smaller water treatment plant on the west side so that you didn't need to pump it and then have it go through. I have no idea, just curious.
We haven't done a detailed analysis of that. My gut tells me that the capital expense might be okay, but where it kind of gets you is then you have multiple facilities that you have to operate, maintain, staff, and everything else.
So it's the ongoing
It hits you
costs.
on the O&M side. So I think if you did the math and said, okay, what does it cost to upgrade our pump station and our force main? And then look at how that factors out life cycle, I think you can. I mean, those numbers are in the 20 to 30 million range, which is a lot, but over time.
That might be.
The staff that would be required at another separate treatment plan and all the issues that go with that.
Thank you.
So that's a lot of context. Next slide up, I think we have the schedule again, just a reminder. So we've covered kind of the overview last time and Kurt, for you, if you need information from last time, I don't know if we got it to you, but let me know and we'll get you information. Okay.
Thank you.
And then today we did the utility assistance, resiliency and capital needs. Next time on the 26th, we're looking at extension of service outside the UGB. There are people outside the individuals, but also the community of Brooks is asking some questions. And so we want to have a conversation about that. Then August 8th, we're going to be talking about irrigation and Creekside. On August 29th, we will be presenting the revenue report proposal along with some other rates that are not part of the utility rate setting, but cold waste and septic rates that factor into our whole management, another piece that affects the whole pie. And then if we're able to make a decision that time, great. We don't expect necessarily that you will, that you may want some additional information or want to have some more conversation. So we plan for a September 12th meeting as well to make a recommendation on the utility revenue slope.
Yeah, I think, we started with the need of the policy stuff today. The next two meetings are really going to get into the heavier lifts of how we handle some of these things and really set policy going forward. So I think there'll be good discussions. We look forward to having those and receiving guidance because they're not easy, straightforward answers, and we got to think about the long-term utility. So, and I guess the only other thing I would add is today we shared a lot of needs of the utility. This is not unlike any other utility that's out there, so we're not alone in that we have all these needs. We'll never have a system that's going to be completely structurally, seismically resilient and have new pipes everywhere. Things just, they're built for a useful life, and over that time, they degrade, and then you got to come back and replace them. So, even if by some, even if we had all the money in the world to go out and build everything right now, we couldn't do everything right now. It's just there's only so much you can do, and only so much you can do at any given time. So, we want to stick with being realistic. And, okay. Thought it has something.
No.
Okay. We do like the lower consistent rates versus putting big spikes. And I read this morning that I think EWEB is proposing a 9% increase on their utility. So those are the kind of things that
EWEB,
EWEB.
Eugene.
So anyway, I just want to share that for some more context and throw that
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to say is what we have tried to do for a couple of decades now is have some annual incremental adjustments. Keep them as small as we can. Sometimes we need to make them larger for a variety of reasons. Either inflation hits us or something hits us and we have to do something a little bit larger, but we've tried to maintain this slow and gradual rate increase. And so that's what we plan to bring back to you again, is something like that. But all these other choices impact that. And so we need your guidance. We welcome your guidance, and then we'll try to pull together the best proposal based on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody have any other questions or?
I'm trying to remember, what was the rate the last couple of years? Was it 2,
5, the last
5? Okay.
cycle were 5,
Okay.
because of the inflation number that we're getting post-COVID. But we were on a 3%. We will give you that rate in history. I'll write that down.
I remember parts of the discussion. I just.
Yeah.
So it's 309 or 109, sorry. My head, I know.
Just gonna sit down reading another meeting.
And I think we are adjourned.
See you in a couple of weeks.
Was what?
Thank you for the rate. Good job. Like, oh, thank you for coming. I do remember. I just don't know. A little bit trouble. We had, that we were trying to plan.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I didn't know that. You're here, and then last.